Yeah, it's Tales from the Jails with John G. Sutton. Yeah, thank you very much for watching this channel. Do like and subscribe, and please don't forget to have a look at my book on Amazon, HMP Manchester Prison Officer. It's there, folks. Yeah, I'm going to talk today about brutality and the abuse of inmates by prison staff. There was, in the 1970s, an experiment conducted in America at Stanford University in which they took a group of students, I believe there were about 40 students, 20 of which were designated to be inmates and 20 of which were designated to be the prison staff. And they put them into a setting that was very similar to a prison and interacted them. So the inmates had to behave as inmates and the prison staff had to behave as prison staff. But the supposed results were that they found that the officers, that's the students who were nominated to behave as prison officers, became extremely brutal and were torturing and intimidating and humiliating the students that were nominated to be prisoners. But what they didn't tell you was, in this Stanford experiment, that the professors who were running this had previously got the groups together and said, you will behave like this, you will attempt to intimidate the guards. And then they got the people who were supposedly the guards, the prison officers, and said, you will behave in an aggressive manner towards them. So they'd programmed them. And then they set it off running. And of course, what happened was it got slightly out of hand. So after about 2 days, 3 days, they had to stop the experiment because the guards, the students that were the prison guards were actually physically hurting the students that were designated to be the inmates. But historically speaking, it's always been so. I mean, we used to see it at the prisons. You get staff coming in who had misinterpreted their role as prison officers and seriously believed that they were there to administer punishment to the prisoners. That's not the reason they were prison officers. No, they were there to make sure that the inmates of the prison did not escape, maintained the discipline within the prison, were fed, properly medicated, and generally safe within that secure environment. So the actual punishment was the imprisonment. Now, historically speaking, that was not always the case. If we go back to ancient Greece, they didn't punish people like that. They used to chain them up and against a big wall, and hold them there for things like theft and debt, and they would be generally abused whilst they were chained up. The place was known the area of chains, so they used chains to actually hold them down. In Roman times, they had galley slaves. That's where people will be put to work in the ships. You may have seen historical films of this, obviously fictional films, whereby people are rowing the oars in the galley, and they'd be lashed and generally mistreated, and usually worked until they died. Yeah, in the 1700s, of course, 1600s and all that, 1600s, early 1700s, public execution was the general rule in Great Britain, and we used to have floggings, public floggings, and stocks. That's where they put people sat down into like a wooden trap that trapped their legs into these, they used to call them stocks, and they'd be sat there sometimes for a week at a time while people threw cabbages at them, tomatoes, rotten fruit, who knows what they threw at them. Yeah, but they were generally in the stocks and being publicly humiliated. They had various other devices, but the public execution was that obviously it wasn't much of a deterrent, because for those of you who are familiar with the work of an artist called Hogarth, yeah, he did depictions of executions, and in these scenes, the crowd scenes, you look carefully at the pictures of Hogarth, you'll see that there are people pickpocketing. Yeah, he depicts them, and the people on the scaffold were being hung for things like pickpocketing, because capital punishment was administered for the theft of anything over, I think it was 12 pence. So if you stole something like a sheep, you're going to hang for that. Yeah, if you stole, I don't know, a watch off somebody, you're going to hang for that. Yeah. So the idea of Fagin's little vandals going round London pickpocketing, they'd get hung, because they'd hang them as young as 12. They didn't bother about that. Just string them up. And of course, in those days, it wasn't as technical as it was when Albert Pierrepoint was the hangman, and he would carefully calculate their weight, height, and the length of the drop that they needed to actually clinically snap the neck, because what happens was it snaps your neck and severs the central nervous system and kills you. That's how it worked. But in the Middle Ages, well, in the 1600s, 1700s, that's not how it worked at all. You were just strung up, hanged, and you choked to death. And that's where the term, believe it or not, hangers-on comes in. Because your supposed friends who didn't want to see you struggling, because you would be dangling on the end of a rope, gradually choking to death, they to help you die quickly, would grab hold of your legs, hang on to your legs and swing on them so that you actually choked very quickly. Hence the term hangers-on. Seriously, look it up. Right, and today, what have we got today? We've got mass imprisonment. We've got people with Xboxes, television sets, computer games, guitars, music, and all the rest of it. So we're placating the inmates, but they're still lost the freedom, which is the punishment. And actually administering beatings and torturing prisoners is definitely not the duty of the prison staff. You know, we've got people like Charles Bronson and the inmate Salvador, he calls himself now, who seems to have taken a great deal of pleasure during his time at Her Majesty's prisons and His Majesty's prisons in administering beatings and violence to certain categories of offender, usually people who have been committing sex offences against minors. Which is, it's a disgusting, horrible thing to do, but historically speaking, of course, it's within the general parameter of human behaviour. I mean, read the history of Rome and the history of emperors such as Caligula, who copulated with his sisters and with his horse, by all accounts. Yeah. So today what we have in the prison system is a system of incarceration where people are deprived of their freedom indefinitely, but they're kept in what is purported to be humane conditions. But if you put 3 grown men into a cell designed for one 150 years ago, and there is no sanitation, that's hardly humane conditions, is it? That's what the conditions were when I worked there. It's now time. That's the Song Dinger, folks. And if you wonder where I've been, I've had a few days off. I'm entitled to it, don't you think? My wife does. So she's hidden all the whiskey. I'm going to read you a poem now. I'm not going to sing, but I've rung the Song Dinger just in case you want to escape. This is actually one of my favourite poems. It's by Walter Delamere, it's silver. Slowly, silently, now the moon walks the night in a silver shoon. This way and that she peers and sees silver fruit upon silver trees. One by one the casements catch her beams beneath the silvery thatch. Couched in his kennel, like a log, with paws of silver sleeps the dog. From their shadowy coat the white breasts peep of doves in a silver-feathered sleep. A harvest mouse goes scampering by with silver claws and silver eye, and moveless fish in the water gleam by silver reeds in a silver stream. Silver by Walter Delamere. Thank you very much for watching Tales from the Jails. Like and subscribe, all the rest of it. See you soon.